Because I've gotten a lot of questions about it, I thought I'd do a quick video on the pitch that's seemingly taken over the baseball world. That is the sweeper.
It's the hot pitch.
Before I get into this discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of these cool videos. Now, the sweeper's not a new pitch. It used to be lumped in with sliders. Sliders come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them have a lot of vertical drop. Others have a combination of that depth and horizontal break. And then some go more horizontally. And a sweeper is the more horizontal pitch. Now, this is totally different from the slugger, which is a combination of a slider and cutter. So think of a hard slider like DeGrom's or Tyler Glasnow's. But the term slugger isn't generally used in family-friendly environments for obvious reasons, other than at Truist Field on their Jumbotron, when they mistakenly labeled Steven Wilson's sweeper as a slugger. To explain a slider that goes mostly straight down, think of a bullet or a football. That gyro spin doesn't really create a lot of movement, but it does create something that falls faster than, say, a four-seam fastball. But because it's spinning like a bullet, it doesn't move horizontally, it moves kind of straight. As I mentioned, the sweeper's been around for a while as a pitch, but we just never called it anything special. Think of a Dave Stieb slider that has huge horizontal sweep, or even David Cohn's slider. Or Sergio Romo, who threw a no-dot slider that was based on his two-seam grip, and which got ridiculous wiffle ball movement. Where I believe this whole sweeper revolution started was with Corey Kluber. Kluber had a unique two-seam grip for his breaking ball, and it created a huge horizontally moving slider. Of course, he called it a breaking ball because it was kind of a cross between a slider and a curveball. This pitch was then dissected by Trevor Bauer, as you see in this video, using high-speed edgertronic cameras.
I was kind of dragging it down so it had more of like a bullet spin axis to it, so it wasn't getting the movement that I wanted.
How did you find that? On video?
Video, yeah.
Okay.
High-speed camera, the edgertronic camera. So I changed my grip a little bit, and this is the grip that felt most comfortable with having my thumb under the ball, which coincidentally is actually exactly how Kluber and Clevenger throw their lateral breaking pitch.
Now, the importance of the two-seam grip is because the thing that differentiates a lot of sweepers from a traditional slider is the difference between Magnus effect and seam-shifted wake. I'm sorry, there's some science in this video. Magnus effect is a scientific principle that causes movement in most spinning objects. And for years, we thought that was the only effect that caused baseballs to move. Think of, for example, a 12-6 curveball that goes straight down, or a four-seam fastball that fights gravity. Those are all because of the Magnus effect. Seam-shifted wake is a unique principle found in aerodynamics or aerospace engineering that was discovered by Professor Barton Smith, an aerospace engineering professor.
What you need in order to make this happen is the ball to look asymmetric somehow. And the four seam is as symmetric as you can get. There's stuff just flying all over the place. So two seamers tend to be seam shifted. If I just throw the two seamer straight like that with my fingers right down the middle, it'll do a bit of seam shifted wake. It'll move a little bit extra to the arm side. If I am more clever and I have that, you see that ball is a little bit off center, I can make it go more so. And so that's what I think the difference between the ones that work really well and the ones that work less well.
Seam-shifted wake relies on the seams of the baseball particularly to cause a wake behind the baseball and create unique movement. This is differentiated from just the spinning of the baseball, i.e. the Magnus effect. And it happens when the seam orientation isn't symmetrical as the ball travels through the air. Barton Smith was hired by an MLB team as a consultant, just as I predicted. But other teams soon copied this approach. And this trend became so popular that Baseball Savant created a separate pitch type for a sweeper, distinct from a slider. And that's because most MLB pitchers and MLB teams use the term sweeper now. One cool way of figuring out whether something is using seam-shifted wake or Magnus effect is by looking on Baseball Savant to see the difference between observed movement and movement due to spin. The inferred spin axis uses the assumption that all pitch movement is due to the Magnus effect, so the axis of the pitch is inferred by the movement, whereas the observed spin axis is the actual spin axis of the pitch as determined by Hawkeye cameras throughout the stadium. And the ones with the largest difference between these two are the ones with the largest seam-shifted wake effect. Hopefully that makes some sense. And looking at the leaders in this difference, you see pitchers like Shohei Ohtani, Clay Holmes and his sweeper, Darvish and his sweeper, and even Hayden Wesneski or Michael King, who have absolutely wicked sweepers. One of the leaders in horizontal movement on a sweeper is Lucas Litke, and I talked to him about his sweeper grip. It's a two-seam grip, and he really doesn't even understand why his pitch moves. It just does.
Well, the slider, which I guess everybody wants to know, is just a two-seam grip, but I throw it like a curveball. You know, most people throw a traditional slider like this, you know, where you're kind of behind the ball and go over the top. My slider, I try to think my whole hand here, and I throw it just like my curveball. I just trust that they're going to move different.
What causes it to move different?
That I don't know. To be honest with you, this one's a little above my head. It's honestly, the coaches just told me, trust me, if you throw it like this, it'll move, and it does. It makes no sense to me how I could throw two balls the exact same way. Literally, like, I went with the dumb athlete, you know, hold ball, throw ball.
What do the dots look like on the ball?
I think they would come off like this, and it just kind of like spins almost like a one seam like sinker. So like they would have a dot right here for me and a dot right here.
So it's not even across from each other.
They're across each other on the ball, but whenever they're here, they're supposed to be on this side and this side, pointing up. Like when I throw it, the dot would be pointing at the right-handed hitter's head.
The Yankees basically passed out baseballs with two dots on them and said, if you can make it spin like this, it's going to be a sweeper. So you don't have to know the science behind it to know that it works. And you can even see players pass down their knowledge about a sweeper. For example, here's Darvish and Shohei Ohtani during the WBC discussing their sweeper grips. So the key takeaways are, no, the sweeper isn't new, but it is a new pitch type recognized by Baseball Savant. It's a category of slider that breaks mostly horizontally, and it generally uses a different principle for most sliders, which is it relies on a new discovery called seam-shifted wake to make the ball travel with a seam orientation that enables seam-shifted wake to take place, and usually that's a two-seam grip. This isn't an exhaustive analysis of sweepers, but hopefully this gives you enough to not be confused next time you see the term.